what is your plan? You need to take back the power from the dirty bankers, man. Screw those guys, right? You know. And while you're at it, man, if you want to learn how to take back that power, go ahead and give us a call at 602-277-KFNX, and the producer will take your number, and we'll give you a text back, and we'll set you up with a Bitcoin wallet. And I would recommend the Edge wallet. It's a very simple wallet to download, and you can get multiple coins on that wallet. If you want to get even deeper into that with even more multiple coins, then maybe Coinomi. But if you're just starting out, go ahead and try out that Edge wallet and give us a call here at the station. Leave your number, and we'll give you a text back, and I'll set you up with some Dash. I don't know. Doug might set you up with some Bitcoin. And definitely come out and see us tonight at the monastery. And what's that address again,
That's
Doug?
4810 East McKellips Road in Mesa.
East McKellips Road in Mesa. Well, do you have anything else before we get back to Colin?
Yeah, let's just expand kind of on the earlier what I was talking about with the transfer of value over the internet. That can sometimes be in somewhat of an abstract phrase or term, transferring value over the internet. So the transferring value over the internet, when we first discovered, or the internet came out, and we were able to freely transfer information over the internet, the first obvious application was email. But at that time, we had no way of picturing what smart people would eventually utilize that type of technology for. We couldn't have envisioned social networks and some of all of the things that people built on top of a core technology. So the transfer of value is a protocol. It's a core technology that is the blockchain, and we don't even know yet what different creative people are going to build on top of that. So for when I say the transfer of value, most people think of Bitcoin and blockchain as digital currencies. So we use it to, the first most obvious application is currency or money, in the same way that email was the first obvious application of the internet. So the transfer value can take so many more forms than just currency. And so Nexus is one of these that's thinking outside of the box, thinking beyond just currency, and tackling some higher level problems.
I know, like some of the stuff that he's talking about that he's wanting to solve with Nexus, it makes, kind of the original Bitcoin and everything look like AOL with the dial-up modem and the picture taking 3 weeks to come across. I mean, some of the stuff he's talking about, I'm just like, wow. Let's get into one of those things like CubeSats. Why CubeSats, and what does that solve?
Well, so
and what is a CubeSat?
A CubeSat's kind of, think about it like computers back in the day used to take up full rooms, and then they got small enough to fit in everybody's house. The same thing with a CubeSat. It's a computer that's very small that you can actually put up for a cheap cost. And what it allows you to do is put satellite technology in everybody's hands. So our goal of the Cube satellites is to give more coverage to people around the world, because there's about 5 billion people in the world that can't access these cryptocurrencies because they don't have access to the internet. And then the other thing is developing a model for a distributed satellite constellation, just like ISPs relay traffic for one another, but they all control everything that happens. What we can do is we can have cross-link protocols that are standardized between all these satellites so they can interoperate. And then you can join that cloud or that mesh network up in low Earth orbit. And what it allows you to do is be more resistant to censorship and have easier access for anybody around the world instead of relying on all of the cabling that they're having.
So this is kind of the first stages of you taking the internet away from Big Brother and actually giving it to the public.
That's the plan.
Free and open internet to everybody. And it's going to start off on a small scale, just, very small, just for transactions of Nexus and maybe texting and things like that.
Yep.
But then it will grow just like the internet and everything else grows.
Mm-hmm. I got a question. How many satellites do you think you'd actually need to have up there to take over, say, the root name servers of the internet?
Well, it really depends on what type of frequencies you use. I mean, we're looking into more optical so that you get higher bandwidth, but I'd say a few hundred depending. Well, but you'd want probably thousands upon thousands to add the redundancy for it. But the way to do that is not for one singular company to do it, not for us, but us to help build that model and then develop working groups, kind of how the internet works, where there's the IETF, which is the Internet Engineering Task Force, and they standardize all the protocols. That's how we have all the crypto that we build blockchains on. The similar type of thing, if these satellites can all talk to one another, then we all share and route, and so that multiple companies can start building up around that and deploying these. and then you create a bigger and bigger coverage, and then it's obviously more distributed because it's not owned by a single party.
Awesome.
And it's not like you have access to any way of doing this, right? Your dad works for SpaceX, but how does this differ from what Elon Musk is doing with
Elon's putting up an ISP in the sky, and so I mean that's an internet service provider, and you have to connect through their satellites, so it's centralized to their specific company. What we're doing is we're working with Vector, which is a small rocket launch company, and what they're doing is they're deploying Galactic Sky, and we're deploying our own satellites, and then working with other various projects in order to create that standard and then put up ours and figure out that model and then design the economic incentive for it as well, just like there's an economic incentive to run a node when you're a miner or things of the sort, so that more and more people will begin to do that and it builds itself.
right? And the economic incentive, of course, for Elon Musk is to sell internet to everybody with these satellites. Will your system kind of offer internet to users of the Nexus network, or I mean, will you need to be a Nexus user to do this?
I would rather it be agnostic and not just based around Nexus. I'd want it to be used for anybody that wants to really contribute to it. So I see multiple blockchains being able to contribute and use that space, not just solely upon Nexus.
Awesome. All right. You want to let's talk about Nexus then a little bit. So how did you decide to come up with Nexus, and what is it that you want to solve there? And then we can get into Tritium a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, like a 3D blockchain. A blockchain.
My eyes glaze over.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't even know where to go with a 3D blockchain. A blockchain itself is hard enough to understand. Can you explain how a blockchain works? Just the typical,
the 2D.
Yeah, the 1D blockchain maybe.
So the blockchain, what it really did is it solved the two generals problem with Byzantine fault tolerance. So what that means is if you have two generals and they are trying to communicate a message, you don't have a definitive form of truth. And so one could be malicious, and then if you don't have a way to detect that maliciousness, then a distributed network does not work. So a blockchain, really what it solves is it puts a cost using proof of work and saying that the proof of work is therefore the truth. So in a simple sense, a blockchain is a form of a truth box. And so what we can use that truth box for is the ledger of events of, let's say, financial transactions, which allows us to securely transmit and know that I can't spend the same money twice with you, and you solve that double spending problem. But it's a linear data structure. If to not be too technical, it's every block, think about it, is checksum. So what a checksum is it's basically a hash of all the data, so that if you change any of that data, you break that hash. And so in that way, you can't alter any of that data that's been there. So since it's done through proof of work, it basically weights that checksum down so that in order to be the validator of truth, you have to have an incredible amount of resource. And so it makes it very difficult to attack. So every block is linked to one another, so that if I tried to change a transaction 5 blocks ago, I'd have to redo that proof of work. And the probability significantly decreases that I would be able to do that every single block on the chain, so that you get to the point where there's a 51% attack that is the person that is able to take control of that consensus. So it creates a higher resistance to being co-opted or taken over by any sort of central party, and allows us to exchange data essentially across a global network.
Awesome. Like how does it actually work? So the blockchain is the first block is the Genesis block, and then every transaction that happens every 10 minutes is bundled into a block. And what you're essentially doing is you're going back to root 1 and then starting all over every 10 minutes, right?
Root 1.
You're going all the way back to the very beginning. Each time the block, every 10 minutes, you're resolving the whole blockchain, correct?
No, you're just adding a new block onto the end of the blockchain. You're appending to it.
You're appending to it.
Yes.
Right, but the transaction goes back to the very beginning,
Just
right?
the hash.
The hash. Okay.
Well, it depends on what transaction you're talking about. I mean, the Genesis had one Coinbase transaction. The next block had another Coinbase, and that's what unlocked the coins. And then that has, I mean, if we want to get technical on the UTXO model, you have to claim that output as an input into a new transaction to prove that that coin came from somewhere. And that transaction is then included in this next block, which is appended. And the hash of that transaction, which is the checksum of it, becomes your transaction ID that is then hashed into a Merkle tree, which then becomes a part of that block header. And then that is what is checksummed, or that is what is worked on by a miner in order to weight that data enough where they prove asymmetrically that a certain amount of work was done, but any node can verify it very easily.
So, and So proving this value, that's how you're backing the network, right? The
proof of
ability, right? The proof of work is what gives Bitcoin its value, because what would it cost to change that proof of work?
Incredible.
So, yeah, so
And
it's-
that's part of it. Yeah, the electrical cost to create the currency. Yeah.
Yeah, so what's exciting about this is you can actually hand a digital version of cash over the internet.
And we'll be right back.